Hello, welcome to another edition of Only in Illinois, your weekly video recap from Reboot, Illinois. I'm Madeleine Doubek here with Matt Dietrich, and we just passed the final campaign finance reporting deadline, the big one, until the election. And you've been taking a look at the reports, and what struck you?
Well, what struck me was the sheer amount of money that is being poured into the gubernatorial campaign. And we knew from the start that this was going to be a big one, that it would break records and whatnot. And we are really seeing it now. During the quarter that just ended, Pat Quinn spent $10.8 million on media alone. Bruce Rauner spent $12.4 million on media. Pat Quinn, I went back a few years to calendar year 2010 and ran his numbers. The entire calendar year of 2010, which was, the big election year,
Right.
Pat Quinn raised $6 million.
So he spent more than that in one quarter alone.
He spent more than that on media alone in one quarter. To this point, Rauner's put in a little over $17 million of his own money into his campaign. And what we'll see now in the 2.5 weeks remaining for the election is the big media spending is really going to start happening now. And what are they using this media for? Well, they're using it to inundate us with their messages, but not exactly getting the messages that maybe we should be thinking about. What are some of the things that we should be concerned about going into the election?
One of the things that I've noticed about this governor's race and the situation in the city of Chicago this week is that nobody wants to talk about the huge debt and pension crisis that we all face, and that is likely to take some tax increases. So, we've had 2 debates now in the governor's race. We've heard very little talk about the pension crisis that is still looming, and the pension reform that became law in December of 2013 is still working its way through the courts. Right. Rauner and Quinn are repeatedly asked about what is the alternative if this law gets struck down, because we had an indication this summer from the Supreme Court that that could very well happen. And neither of them will offer any sort of plan B. Quinn says, let's wait to see what the courts have to say, but I'm sure that this law will be found constitutional. Rauner says, I still believe that we should take every employee in the future who's a state employee and put them into a 401k except law enforcement. Mm-hmm. And then we have the city of Chicago. Mayor Rahm Emanuel is facing an election in February, and he has very carefully avoided any major increases in property taxes or sales taxes, and yet the city has to make plans for paying $550 million more into its police and fire pension funds in 2016. You really have to plan for that in next year's budget. Now, he adamantly said that he was not avoiding this right before the election, that it was not playing politics with this, but that nobody wants to have this discussion and think about compromises or alternative solutions until the Supreme Court rules. So everybody's pointing fingers everywhere else. Now they're all pointing at the Supreme Court, and we're still, we've wasted essentially an entire year waiting for an answer from them. We need to start having these conversations. The Civic Committee of the Commercial Club of Chicago, big business executive group in Chicago, has tried to get some more attention on this by saying we need to start talking. What if the Supreme Court throws out this pension reform? We still have this debt to pay off, and yet none of our politicians are answering these questions. Right,
and then and the other group with Civic in the name that everyone gets confused, the Civic Federation, came out this week with another one of its really good analysis of the fiscal year 2015 state budget. It did not say a lot of good things about the plan, the spending plan the state has right now.
Right, it said essentially that there are no plans being made. They're taking from one fund to pay off something in another fund. They're assuming that they have more money than they're actually going to have when the income tax rate drops as it's supposed to in January. You know, they're essentially, what they have done will, by the end of the current fiscal year, increase the amount of, separate from the pension fund, increase the amount of bills that the state of Illinois owes people who are providing services to the state.
We're gonna hit about over $6 billion.
You know, taxes are probably going to be part of the mix here. Pat Quinn has campaigned all along since March saying he wants to make permanent the 5% rate, which is technically a tax increase because it's supposed to go down to 3.75. Bruce Rauner has said he wants to impose sales taxes on services that haven't had them. And Rahm Emanuel, in his budget speech this week, he avoided the big taxes, but he's already passed and gotten approval out of the city council for $56 million in telephone taxes. Now he wants to add taxes onto parking in Chicago, cable TV, skyboxes, leasing equipment and vehicles in the city of Chicago to the tune of $61 million in additional taxes beyond the $56 million, and that is without addressing any of the $550 million police and fire pension payment that needs to be made. And so this is not, you know, as you think about this as you're heading out to the polls, what I would advise or suggest, if you want to listen to my opinion, is you need to think about which of these approaches to taxing and budgeting and addressing this bill crisis is preferable to you, because there are very different approaches to the problem. With the two candidates for governor, Pat Quinn wants to make the income tax permanent. Bruce Rauner has kind of hinted that maybe it can't drop as quickly as he would like it to, but he'll try to chip away at it over his 4-year term if he wins. And in the meantime, he would impose taxes on all these services that haven't been taxed before. That's it for this week's edition of Only in Illinois. We hope you got all that. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next edition.